Hey guys, today we're going to go over the MEANjs stack and how we, sort of like what we did 2 semesters ago when I was using it in CE in 3031, sort of the changes we had to make to get to what we wanted our app to look like. And so I'll talk about that in depth. We used, again, so we'll just start at the very basics. MEAN is the framework that we're using. M stands for MongoDB. That is the database system it uses. We used MLab, which is like a cloud implementation of MongoDB. It worked really well for us. We should probably stick with it. If we need to buy more data for the database, like more size, we can get like a terabyte for not that much money. In the meantime, I think we get up to half a gigabyte for free, which is a pretty good deal. So you really can test it without having to do that at all. I had success with this site. It worked really well. I trust it. It's pretty good. So I'm also going to demo it with this right now. So you can see the way that we have to sign in. There's 2 database users. This is the one that I used for publishing it on GitHub, basically. So yeah, this is what you're seeing right here. This is JSON. So JavaScript object notation. It's all these things with curly braces. So you use curly braces to define like an object, or actually, any object, right? Which has a bunch of key value pairs in it. So it's got this ID thing, and then so the key ID corresponds to a value of mark mean get test URI. Then you got to do a comma, go to the next field, and there's another key value pair, and that can continue. And then instead, if you want a list, you use these straight braces instead. And this is sort of the standard indentation scheme for it, because it establishes the hierarchy, right? Like roles has both a role key and a DB key, and they each have their own values. You'll notice like this last one doesn't get a comma. Again, that's just JSON syntax, so you got to get used to that. But yeah, it's just key value pairs separated by commas, and you can have these lists and sort of like go down the rabbit hole recursively. Like a key could have a value that's actually another object inside it. And so, yeah, that's sort of what this is, right? It's actually a list, I guess, but the list only has one object in it. So the objects are defined by the braces, the lists are defined by these straight brackets. Okay, so this is like a user object that we're looking at there. And the way that we call it in the database is using this MongoDB URI thing, right? So you can see this is the standard format for doing it. You do MongoDB : /DB user, which would be get test URI, and then the DB password. So I think open pass, right? Yeah. And then this is sort of the site that it's on. Is this subsite of mlab.com? You have to give it like a number, I guess. And then mark-mean is the database that it's using for this test environment. So I have the server running here. There's a couple different ways to start it. You can start with npm start, and that runs a bunch of like checks first. But the faster way to start it is to just do node server.js. You have to have Node.js installed on your machine for this to work, I think. But you'll see the development environment is working. So clone the repo, see if you can get this to run just like this. If it says this, that means you can probably go to localhost 3000, just like this, and you'll see, yeah, it takes you to this website, and you know it's being hosted on your machine. So these are the users for the database. Right, so it's sort of the user client key thing. But if we go to collections, we don't actually have any users that have a role on the site yet, which is a problem. So I'm going to make one. And I sort of have to do this in order to show any of the functionality for like how the site works. So let's do like MEANjs capital DMO 12 $12. Jeez. No. Okay, so we get this error, not approved by an admin. That's because that's sort of a thing that we actually did. There's backend logic for that. So right now the user object I created, we'll see it if I refresh this database. Right there, look at that. So this guy, we're going to actually change it. And ordinarily you wouldn't have to go into the database to do this. You could just do it normally. So instead of a TA, I'm going to say that this account is an admin. I'm going to set approved status to true. And you'll see that there are these fields in the database schema that we have. So let's just use save and go back. Now if I try and do it, it'll let me on. Boom, just like that. We don't want to save that though. Okay, and so yeah, the main things we changed were up here, these different tabs. So we did a lot of stuff with the way that users work and users are approved and stuff like that. And we have items. Every user role on this system can sort of see items, but there's different permissions for categories and modules. Those are sort of different ways to sort of sort the items, and you know, it sort of tags the item with like different things. I'll show you. So there's all this stuff for like configuration. app.json I believe has like some dependency stuff, like here's the build pack or whatever. It's got deployment information. Server.js, this is again the file that ends up getting run. It just does app.start. It requires config lib app, right? So what is that? If we go in config lib, so it uses the server.start thing, uses this, and yeah, it invokes a bunch of other stuff. Again, most of the code that we do is in this folder, modules. I just kind of want to show you what the other stuff is like, I guess, even though we really didn't touch it that much for our project. I think this is mostly like update scripts and stuff like that. Yeah, like if you got to reset your password or generate SSL certificates, which we do have to do, because you'll notice this is actually using HTTP. It's not using HTTPS. That is an issue. We got to get that working. So we better run this script and whatever we have to do. Let's go to modules. So again, there's core, items, and users. Those are really the three modules that we've got, right? So the categories and modules, again, modules here is different than the other modules. There's a MEANjs module, which are these three things, and then there's a module on this site, which is like sort of an idea we used to, they wanted a different way to organize sub parts of a course, right? Like they had sort of a rotation scheme going where students would have like a course module on like thermodynamics or something, and then they would have one on electromagnetism or something, and they would get moved through them, right? So maybe you use the heat pump for thermodynamics or whatever, but when you get to electromagnetism, you've got like this coil thing instead. And so they wanted a way to tag information like, okay, it's used for this part of the course or this part of the course, so on. And they wanted TAs to have specific permissions for certain modules. All right. So let's just delve into it. You'll notice each of these modules has a client and a server, and I think all three of them also have tests, right? It's pretty self-explanatory, but it is actually like cleanly divided. Like everything that gets sent to front-end JavaScript or like HTML is in the client folder. Everything that's like server-sided routes, you know, like validation that like someone is the right user role, any calls to the database, those are all in server. And then tests are, you know, kind of a shit show. Again, there are also client and server tests, right? So there are also, I think, E2E tests for some of these, end-to-end. But yeah. So let's say we go into items, client, views. Let's go into the admin views, right? Because I just want to show you how the HTML corresponds to what we're seeing on here. Let's go to add delete categories. So if we go to manage categories, this is the page that corresponds to that, right? So you'll see it's got like the page header stuff, h1 categories right there. There's some divs. Divs are just used to organize things and like set a class for like everything that's inside of it. UI sref. So what does this do? BTN primary. This is like a certain. It basically specifies the color of like the thing that we're doing. So add category button. That's this thing right over here. Primary color for our scheme is, I guess, orange then, right? And so if we click this, what it does is it actually redirects us. UI sref means go to this module instead. We get sent to admin.items.category create. So where is that exactly? It's going to be admin items category create. Oh no, sorry. It's gonna be this one. So this form is actually used for two different things. It's used for editing an item, in which case it's loaded with the things that already had in it, and then you can change them and save the changes, or it's for a completely new one. So I'll just show you the ways that it's different, I guess. So if we click this, we get sent to this new thing. It's really only got two fields. It's got a name that takes a title, and it wants a hex color. So input name hex color. It's got a placeholder in it, and it's got a required pattern. So this is, to make sure that the user types valid info in it, I guess. Although I think we handle it on the back end too, because you want to handle it on the front end so the user knows what you're doing, and you want to handle it on the back end just in case some malicious person tries to pass it through your like front end logic and sends malicious data packets to the back end server anyway, which is not what you want. So I think it's a regular expression that we used here. Button type submit. So I don't know if we actually had a form. I think we individually. Okay, so this is an AngularJS thing right here. The way you do it is you say there's this thing called the VM, right? And the VM has different fields in it. So for this page, it's basically everything's in vm.cat. It's in vm.cat form, and so on ng submit, we run the script for vm.create, and then the ng model is what binds these text fields to the data that we're sending back to the server, right? And so it's a binding from like HTML form entry stuff to the Angular, right? So ng, anytime you see ng in a directive like this in an HTML line, that's an Angular binding. And so I think you get ng model is pretty common, and so is ng bind. I forget the difference between them, but there is some difference. It might be like a one-way versus a two-way thing. Right. Category name is required, so this is like the error message that pops up if you don't put in a category name. So like let's do this. Okay, please fill out this field, which is not exactly what I expected to get, but whatever. I think that there might be some theme things that are happening kind of on top of the stuff that we have that sort of just makes it easy. Like maybe we didn't actually need that line there because it's going to handle the error in a different way anyway. Whatever. I'm not worried about that kind of thing necessarily. New category. Let's just do like heat sinks. You get this confirmation, which is a little bit annoying. We'll just say yes. So that's actually something that was coming up. So this was all HTML. Let's look at the actual front-end code that's getting run. So anything that was in views is going to be HTML. And then these are the controllers, right? So I was just on, that was a category, right? So I think this is the controller for categories. This one is. So this is the controller for the category list page. This is for the modules list page. This is the category creation controller page. This is the module creation controller page. We could have named our files a little bit better, for sure. So you'll see there's more stuff with this VM. There's a whole bunch of things that you need to just inject into the controller kind of by default, right? Scope, state, window, cat resolve, whatever, authentication, and notification, right? So there's, yeah, I can't explain all of it. Some of it's just copy paste kind of thing, but you'll see that this function create is what's getting called from the HTML. I'll go back and show you again. So we get this if window.confirm, which is what gives us that nice pop-up thing. Are you sure you want to create? And then if you say yes, this is all what's inside the if statement. We do vm.cat.new, and this is like a callback function kind of thing. So we're passing this function as an argument. We're saying we're gonna, after we do this new function, we're passing it this callback function. So we're saying as a parameter to this other thing that we're running, we're gonna do this. You might not have seen callbacks before, depending on the programming languages you've used, but they're pretty important. I would look them up. We kind of do them a lot in MEANjs programming. So we do state.go, admins, items, categories, and that just refers to a different controller. You'll see that this is the items.admin is the module that we're in right now. So this says, where else are we going? We're going to admin.items.categories. And so that takes us back to this page that we're on now, because we just created that one. One thing you'll see is we've got this nice little underline on this guy. That was the thing that we definitely did by hand, having that nice underline under the color that actually represents the color. So this is actually an RGB color code that we gave it. So you'll notice it's a little bit R, a little bit G, and no B. That creates this brown thing. Let's just do another one. And you got a red there. Okay, and then if you go to the list one instead, this is the controller for the list page. Again, it really only has one function in it. It's the one with remove. We get a window.confirm, are you sure you want to delete? And then this is what it does. So it does two things here when we call this remove function. If we are sure that we want to delete it, inside the if statement we do vm.categories.splice. This is like an array editing method, and so we're from the index of cat, the one that we're trying to remove, with a length of 1, we're going to splice it out of the array, basically. It's just a fancy way of removing it from the front end thing. And then we actually do category service.rem cat. So the services are sort of how we talk to the back end, right? So not only are we going to remove it from the front end, but we're going to tell the back end that, hey, we tried to rem this particular category. So if I delete this one, it actually goes away from the front end. And then if I refresh the page, it'll still be gone, is the key, right? So it talks to the server again when it reloads the page, and it's still gone from there because we actually deleted it. If we only spliced it and we didn't call that category service remove, that would be an issue for us. Is that we would have it disappear when we originally ran this delete thing, but then when we refresh the page, it would still be there. Okay, so that was in the controllers. Again, the views are the HTML for it. So let's go. You'll see that it's in the admin folder. That's because for this particular stack that we have, the categories and modules are admin functionality. Just the regular items are the things that everyone has access to. But categories, modules, and then managing user permissions is something that the admins are allowed to do. So you can see I can go to users. I get all this info. I can click this guy. So this is me. His roles are admin. It's a bunch of other stuff. I can edit him. Not really going to do that though. I can go edit my profile. You can actually do a profile picture. This is basically going to be built into what we have already, so I'll just do that. Look at that. You get a nice profile picture. You can change your password. Lots of the stuff we didn't actually have to do for our project. It was just sort of built in. Although we did do this thing where you get emailed a temporary password when you create your account. Or it's when an account gets created for you, you get emailed a temporary password that you can sign in with once. And we had to do that manually. So this is, still the item stuff. So let's show you what happens on the server side for that kind of stuff too. Probably important to talk about that. Real quick, I want to try to find where we did the theme. Man, where was that? Might have to take a break. I think my family's home anyway, but I'll do more later.